Alright, for today's video, I'm going to make a wakizashi, a type of samurai sword, and I already made it. Here it is. The difference between this one and most of the other ones I make, like all these here, whether it's the Deathstroke New 52 Godkiller sword, this has a PVC pipe running down it. It's very heavy, it's very stiff. Okay, this one here is from a different build video I did. It's up on the channel if you want to check it out. It is a katana for my Deathstroke costume. And similar thing, it has a solid core going through it. It has a dowel rod that I did cut in several places to give it a slight curvature, but I also cut it so that it would, if need be, collapse or break. And the entire end of this is just completely soft. There's nothing in it. And this here I made for my fiance's Wonder Woman costume, kind of an old school gladius style sword. Also has a solid core. And the core of this, I believe, the handle is from a barbecue fork, and it has a yardstick attached to that actually runs through the center. But a lot of the complaints I've been reading in comments lately, since they've been banning all this stuff, is that these things aren't really safe. So I decided to make one that doesn't have a solid core. It's entirely EVA foam, and it's completely floppy. It's just about as safe as you can get, and I feel like this is a good middle ground for, people that want to ban these props and these prop weapons at conventions, which of course I don't think any of the cosplayers or most of the fans want. But yeah, this is totally floppy, safe. It doesn't quite look as good, obviously, as, say, this Deathstroke katana. But, like I say, this is me trying to find a middle ground. So, alright, let's get into the video, and hopefully this will be entertaining. You guys will learn something, and, we can help move forward. Alright guys, so I've already done a sword build video, but there was a dowel rod running through the center of it, and, it's pretty safe, but still not 100%, I would say as safe as you could possibly make a prop weapon. So this one I'm going to make not a full katana, but a wakizashi. And I'm going to do it using some EVA foam, a cardboard tube. Yes, that's right, a cardboard tube. Some contact cement, hot glue, super glue. A lot of the stuff I normally use, Mod Podge, my airbrush, etc., etc. And first thing I do here is I have some of this 5mm EVA foam. And I've already taken and drawn the pattern on here for the blade, and I didn't download this pattern online or anything like that. I just got this pattern literally from taking a real katana that I have and tracing it out. But you can go ahead and just draw out your own shape or size. It doesn't even have to be a katana. You could do a gladius style sword or anything really. And now that I've got my pattern, I'm going to take scissors. I'm not even going to use an X-Acto knife. I'm just going to take scissors, and this back edge here, I'm going to cut relatively straight. Okay? Straight. Now, this outside edge that's going to represent the actual cut of the blade is going to be cut on a bias. And what that means is, instead of, cutting it with the scissors being totally straight, I'm going to cut it at a 45-degree angle. That's going to go ahead and already give you a nice edge that'll come to a point whenever you cut out two of these. Okay, so first I'm going to cut out my first piece. Okay, I got my first piece cut out, and you can see this backside edge here is flat. But whenever you look at how I said I cut this on a bias, you can see it already has somewhat of an angle. And when I cut out a second piece and the center piece and we put all this together, it's already going to have a decent angle. You're not going to have to do a ton of sanding. You're going to do some sanding, but not as much. Okay? So now that that's done, I'm going to take this piece that I just cut out. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. Put it on another piece here and flip it over. So it's opposite of what it was, and I'm going to go ahead and trace along here and cut it out, same as the other, backside straight, other edge at a bias. Alright, and now that I have the pieces cut, I went ahead and shored up the end here and cut them even. That way they're flat. Next, I'm just going to trace the outline of it onto a piece of 3mm EVA craft foam. And once I get the outline of this, I'm going to go ahead and basically cut a smaller sliver section. This is going to go through the center, slightly offset, more towards the backside. I'm going to go ahead and trace this and draw it out and show you what I mean. Okay, here is what I was talking about with the center insert. And how this is going to work is, you can see here I have the two pieces cut on a bevel that match up. This is going to go basically down the center, but slightly offset here, more towards the back side. And all three of these pieces are going to get sandwiched and glued together. But first, I'm going to take some heat, start putting some curvature into this, so that these edges will match up better. Alright, using a heat gun, I have heated this slightly on the inside to give it a nice curve and taper so that this centerpiece will fit in here and it'll help hold its shape. And to glue this in, I'm going to use some super glue, line it up, put it right in the center, and just glue it in and let it sit long enough for the super glue to sit. Alright, I have my insert glued in here, and you'll notice that I took some hot glue and put a very thin bead around this. Not only is that going to help to seal it in place here, but it is also going to help to give this a little bit more stiffness whenever all is said and done. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and glue the two halves together. And you can probably see here, what I've put on the edges is some contact cement. You spread it on each edge, each part of the surface that you're going to bond, and you let it sit about 15 minutes until it no longer looks liquid and it looks, pretty dry. And one of the things with contact cement is the second that you glue it together with the contact cement, boy, it is stuck. And I mean, it is stuck. So try to have it as lined up as possible whenever you put it together. Be very careful, go very slow, and that way you have a nice even edge. You can always go back through and sand it, and inevitably I know I'm going to have to sand this. I'm going to have to do some stuff to it, but the closer lined up you get it, the less repair and fix work you have to do later. And last and not least, before I put this together, I am going to run some more super glue down this center piece. I could just contact cement the whole thing, and the contact cement's pretty flexible. Super glue happens to form a chemical burn and really does stiffen up the EVA foam, and that'll help for the blade to hold its shape. Because by not having any sort of dowel rod or yardstick or anything going through this that's solid, yes, it's going to be safer, and in the fact that, it's going to be more convention friendly, and since they've been banning prop weapons and doing all this stuff, I hope that goes away and that they just have some restrictions as far as, it being foam. Like, you can't have a steel sword or an aluminum sword. And that's what I'm doing these videos for right now. It's what this endeavor is for, to show that, we can do something that's not, maybe dangerous to yourself or others in the slightest. It's just a floppy foam sword with a floppy foam core, and yeah, it is going to take a little more patience and care so that these don't get banged up and beat up when you're taking it to and from the convention or when you have it there. But hopefully this will help pacify the fears of people, because, you can still cosplay without the weapons, but I do feel like something will be lost if that becomes a permanent thing. So this is my way as an individual, is taking a step forward to making props look still good, feel good, but be as safe as possible. Alrighty, both sides have been glued together, And I took an old paintbrush and some super glue, and I just brushed some along the edges here just to make sure that it stays nice and firm. This will also help stiffen up the EVA foam some, so whenever you're doing sanding, it'll come out a little smoother and a little easier with a little bit less of those burrs and jags that you tend to get whenever you're sanding on the foam, because the foam, it won't sand smooth and you're going to have to heat it. And yeah, and of course, you know, it's holding its shape pretty good, but it's still, you know, it's still flexible enough that it's safe. And next I went and cut out a handguard. You can cut this in whatever shape you want. I literally just cut a square and then cut off the edges. I heated it with a heat gun. I put a slit in the middle, and the slit is when I'm going to pull this core through, and I'm going to attach it with some super glue and some hot glue. Alright, now that I have this end piece glued on, I cut a couple more pieces of the 5mm EVA foam just into some blocks, and those are going to be glued onto either side of this green piece to help firm up and shore up this guard here to the blade itself. Alright, I got this glued together, sealed it off with some super glue, or not super glue, sorry, hot glue. And next I'm going to glob some hot glue down inside here and put some on here. I'm going to go ahead and join the handle to this. You'll notice initially this was round. I did squeeze it down a little bit just to make it oval. And we are going to cover this with some foam so it won't look like a cardboard tube. Alright, now that this is pretty much together, I've begun filling in the cardboard space of the handle. And how I'm doing that is I just took some scrap EVA foam I had lying around, and I cut it up into these little chunks. And all I'm simply doing is taking this handle part here and taking some of these scraps and just dropping them down in there. Not too much at a time. If I would have to give a measurement as far as how deep, I would say probably enough of these to form about a 1/4 inch or so layer. And then on top of that, I simply take it over, and I'm taking my hot glue and I'm simply just letting it run down inside. Give it a few pumps, let it sit and settle and cover the EVA foam scraps. When I drop it in there, you could theoretically just sit here and fill it up with hot glue, but it's going to be real heavy and expensive. Using the scrap EVA foam as filler, I feel like is working pretty good. And that's how I'm going to continue to fill the rest of this handle up. It's not going to be super solid, but it will be a little heavier. It'll be a little more weighted, and it'll help. If you get too tight of a grip on it, you won't totally crush the handle. Alright, now that I have this end piece here all filled, I got a scrap piece of 3mm EVA foam and put a little glue on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and set that over it before it fully has the chance to cool. And take this, press it on, make sure it's nice and tight and even. And then once that dries and cools, I'm just going to take scissors and trim off the excess part of the square so it matches up with the handle. Alright, now that my end piece is trimmed off here, I'm going to start wrapping the handle so it just doesn't look like a, cardboard tube. And I got some strips of 2mm EVA foam here. This stuff I actually found a long time ago at Walmart. It has an adhesive back to it, which will make it easier just for me to wrap this around. Now the adhesive isn't 100%, so I do have some Gorilla Super Glue here to help facilitate that process. I'm going to start from the top and wrap and work my way down to the bottom. Alright, I cord wrapped the handle, and it had some upholstery tacks lying around, so I stuck a couple on each side so it looks similar to an actual full tang katana where they end up pegging it. And now what I've gone on to doing is I started to already sand down this edge so I can get the bevel and the edge as smooth as possible. And once that's done, I'm going to move on to sealing this and painting it. Alright, and starting here on the handle, just going to go ahead and use some Plastidip on that. Okay, here it is after it's all sprayed with Plastidip. I'm going to go ahead and let that sit for a few hours so that dries out and solidifies, and the rest of it, I'm just going to be brushing Mod Podge on it. Alright, now that the plastic dip has had a chance to set and dry up, I'm just taking my Mod Podge here and going lengthway pretty thickly down the length of the blade. I'm going to do that on both sides a couple times. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do next. If you're familiar with what a Hammond line is, I'm going to do the best I can to simulate a Hammond line using some Mod Podge to give it some varying texture with these long straight strokes that I'm doing here. Alright, I got the blade fully coated with all the brush strokes running lengthways up it. I'm going to let that dry and come back and work on the edge. Alright, now this is nice and dry and sealed. I'm going to go through and work on simulating a Hammond line. And what that is it's, I don't know if you've ever noticed it on katanas, it's kind of that wavy area that goes around the front. It has to do with the way that they heat it and temper it. Basically, it makes the front end of the blade very brittle, yet able to hold a razor edge. And the backside is softer, so when they clash or you slap parry, it absorbs the impact and makes the blade overall stronger. And yeah, I could just paint this silver, paint the edge a slightly different wavy silver, okay, yada yada yada, it's done. But whenever the light hits it, you're going to see it's just flat. And I actually wanted to give some sort of definition here. So I'm basically just going to go through and just kind of goop on a pretty thick wavy area of Mod Podge. I did this on the Deathstroke Katana, and it works pretty good. Now, this is a pretty wide blade. Yours may not be as wide, so you may not want to do it as wide. But yeah, I'm just basically going to build it up nice and thick all along the edge. Okay, here it is gooped up pretty thick on both sides, and it's not completely consistent. It doesn't need to be. I've never seen a truly consistent, like perfectly even Hammond line, so it doesn't have to be exactly right. In fact, the less exact it is, I feel the better it'll look. The main thing I think to concentrate on is making sure that you put it on evenly thick all the way up and down it. Otherwise, you're going to have spots where the light's going to hit it and it's just not going to quite look right. This is, of course, an aesthetic choice, entirely up to you. But this is, you know, what I want to do and what I like and how I think it should look. And I'm going to go ahead and let this dry. And I'm going to come back and use my airbrush to primer it all. Alright, now that the Mod Podge is dried, you can see, you know, when the light hits it, even though I haven't painted or done anything yet, you can see the straight grain of the lengthways brush strokes in juxtaposition to the globbed on Hammond line. Okay, it's going to help it look a lot more realistic without putting a lot of money or effort into it. Just a very simple technique. And now I've got my airbrush all hooked up, and I'm going to go ahead and paint this with a mixture of some opaque black and this 4030 polyurethane additive. Stuff's great. Bonds really well, gives it a nice, durable, glossy undercoat. Alright, next I've loaded up some Wicked Colors, Wicked Silver into the airbrush, and I thinned it out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do a sort of a general overspray over the whole entire length of the blade on both sides. Alright, so the paint job has been finished on this, and I feel like it's okay for something I didn't put a whole lot of effort into as far as on a technical aspect. But the real question is, how is this going to look whenever I'm swinging it around? So I'm going to give a quick demonstration on camera, because this blade is super flexible. But you can still see, you know, how it looks as I swing it. Okay, so you can probably see as I swung it, it stays pretty straight and it's pretty even. It looks decent, I think, on camera. And especially when, like I say, when you consider there's no solid core to this, there's no dowel rod, there's no yardstick, there's no nothing in here to give it any stability. It's just foam. And you can see, just how floppy it is. And like I say, this is not so much, hey, check out this prop build, as, this is my middle ground. Instead of just complaining about the fact that they want to ban prop weapons, there has to be a way we can make them a little safer and maybe meet them halfway. I don't really see any sort of establishment meeting citizens halfway on anything, but this is still my attempt. Instead of just complaining, well, if you're a Jedi or a Sith, you can't have a lightsaber. If you're Deathstroke or Deadpool, you can't have your swords. There's got to be some middle ground for this. Between the cosplayers and the people that are running these venues and doing these comic book conventions. And like I say, totally floppy, totally safe. And yeah, hopefully you guys like this video and it gave you some ideas. And, let's hope we can just move forward and keep the community the way it is, and the passion and the interest the way it is. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you.